I'm out of the etrailer. If you plan on doing any type of off-roading or overlanding and you're just trying to move your camper or maybe your boat with you, but it keeps on getting stuck, or you're just having issues moving it and you're trying to get through that either deeper mud, sand, or even just rough terrain where you're driving over roots, then the Ark Xtreme Off-Road Jack with wheels is going to be a great option for you. So let's check it out. What's great about jacks with any type of wheel on them is they're just a little bit more mobile and just easier to move around as opposed to something without wheels. Now there are a lot of jacks that have caster style wheels, and those are perfectly fine, especially if you live on pavement and you're just trying to move it around either your driveway or your garage. But if you're going through that more extreme terrains like I was talking about earlier, sand, mud, or just gravel like we're on right now, a lot of times you're going to run into how those wheels are going to perform, or they could break over time. That's why I like this, because we have these larger wheels that are made out of rubber, so they're going to be more sturdy, they're going to handle gravel easier too, and just the overall construction of it is pretty strong too. But today we're really just going to be focusing on how this is going to work. I'll kind of showcase it off a little bit. After that, I'll talk about some of the specs, and then we'll talk about installing it after that. Now, when you are using this jack, you're probably mostly going to be using it with a winch. Because if you're going off-roading or overlanding, you're probably going to run into a few spots that have maybe valleys or just really extreme spots where you can't get your trailer attached to your vehicle in the same setting. So what you'll have to do to get through those really rough spots where you have a lot of dirt, mud, sand, is pulling it via winch. And this actually handles our winch really well just because of how those wheels are designed versus any type of caster wheel. But we don't have any spots like that here today. All I really have is gravel, and this is going to come into people who have just really rough driveways where you have a lot of gravel and you need to move this around so you don't make contact with your house or anything like that. And this actually moves pretty well. Now I do have this teardrop camper, and that is a little bit heavier, so it is a little bit more difficult to move, but it's definitely still doable. As you can see, when I move this side to side, this moves relatively well. I can actually move this handle too, but if I move this to the side, this handles nicely. Now the hardest part I find is just trying to pull on it, which it is doable, but you're going to have to put a lot more force behind there. That's going to be more important because when you are backing up to your trailer and you just try to line up that ball to your coupler, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult, especially if you don't have a backup camera. And if you're doing it by yourself, what you could do is just move this around and try to line up that ball so it's just a little bit easier for you. Now I will say, when you are trying to line it up with your vehicle, you're still probably going to have to fight with it just a little bit. Now, like I said, our trailer does have a little bit of weight behind it, and so every time we try to line it up, it moves sometimes, so you're probably still going to have to get out of your vehicle a few times. This is going to cut out a few steps though. Now, when we do go to jack it down, this doesn't feel too bad. We do have this magnetic handle. It kind of makes this process a little bit easier. And I kind of like how high it is. I don't necessarily have to kneel down to do this process. But we still can kind of help align everything as we're pushing it down. Make sure we have a good transition. Yeah, I'm really not finding too much resistance against here. And this definitely does cut down on some of that time when you are trying to couple up. And when you're connected to your vehicle, you can put this into the stow position. Just make sure you do take off that magnetic handle. Just pulls right off. Just make sure you don't lose that, since that's going to be what you use to primarily jack it up into place. But what we're going to do is just pull on this side here and lift up some. Now I will say this can be a little bit difficult because this is a little heavy, so I might even stand up for this and have it in a more compact position. And then from the side here, I'm just going to push on this lever and then it'll tilt. Now sometimes you might have some resistance with that. Reason being is we do have a thicker powder coat finish to it, so it'll last longer. But this is going to be what it's like when you're driving around in this more compact position. But after he's talking about that construction, let's kind of go into some of the specs. So this is going to have a weight capacity of 1,100 pounds. So that's going to be pretty sturdy, and it will handle most things you throw at it. but it's going to be great for if you have any type of camper like we have now, or any type of boats too. But if you need something a little bit stronger, that's okay. We also have some larger versions of these with some slightly higher weight capacities. You'll also find some other types of jacks that do have higher capacities, but they'll usually have some type of caster wheels, and I'm not a big fan of caster wheels. They just don't travel as well as some more rubberized wheels. And talking about the wheels, let's talk about the construction, because the construction of this is what allows it to have such a high weight capacity. So starting with the wheels, there are going to be 2 of them. And what I like about having 2 wheels is this widens our footprint. And when we have more of a footprint, we're going to be able to have more surface area spread around, so it doesn't sink into the ground, dirt, or mud as easily. So it's going to have a little bit of tread on it, not too much, just enough to really help it grab onto any type of sand or mud when you're going across it. But what's great is these aren't air filled, these are going to be completely solid. So you don't have to worry about any holes being punctured in them. And the rest of this will be constructed from steel. So it's going to be very strong, very heavy too. So when you are moving around, you're definitely going to feel that heft. But to make sure it lasts longer, like I said, we do have that black powder coat finish on it. And what that finish allows is to prevent any water from really resting on it and corroding over time. And on top of that, we're going to have a zinc finish to this. So what that's going to help do is just help it be more resilient to any type of salts. Now, with all those finishes, like I said earlier, you might have a little bit of resistance with this handle right here, but everything else feels pretty smooth and easy to transition. One spot to really think about would be right here where we have that rod sticking through this plate. What this is doing is keeping our wheels in place, so when you're on the road, a lot of times there's going to be a lot of rattling, especially if you're driving over any type of gravel. This is feeling pretty sturdy, so what that's just doing is just giving this a longer lifespan, because anything that is going to move or rattle over time is eventually going to wear it down. With this, you really don't have to worry about that too much. Now let's go over a few measurements. So the whole thing in this more compacted position is going to be about 26 inches. And you can actually move this by 2.5-inch increments. So right now, like I said, we have this in the lowest position. To really showcase it in that taller position, I'm actually going to put it back down just by pulling on this lever. Sometimes you might have to wiggle it again because some of that finish might get stuck. Make sure it latches down all the way, or you won't be able to move it again. And I'm just going to lower it just like that. Just make sure it locks into place. There you go. It's locked in. And we can actually raise it up. How far this can raise up, I'll actually crank this down just to get a better visual of that. And doing this doesn't feel like it has too much resistance to it. It feels pretty easy to do. Now, if I had more weight on this side, I might notice more of a difference. What I also like is this handle does spin, makes that process a little bit easier too. And you'll notice how that little bar we have at the bottom here, this is completely detached now. That allows your wheels to fully pivot 360, so you can kind of go any which direction you please. But as you can see, this gets up pretty dang high. And there we have it. This is going to be it in this maximum height. And there's going to be a few things you'll notice too. So I do want to point out, we have this line here at the bottom. Before I get my measurement, I want to talk about this line. This right here is going to be the max position you can have for when you're moving it around. So just make sure you do not exceed this to move, because the higher you go, the less structurally sound this will be. So staying in between these points here will do you just fine. But let's get a measurement to see how much of a transition we have. And that is going to be just about a little bit over 10.5 inches. So that's just this position right here. If I had this in a higher position, the whole thing would be a little bit taller too. In my opinion, I think this is a great option if you are planning on doing any type of off-roading or overlanding because of this construction we have. Now there are a lot of other options that are great trailer jacks with wheels, but they typically fall a little bit short just because they're not going to be as sturdy as this one, and they're not going to have the quality of wheels we do. Now, if you want the option to just be a little more stable, you don't need the wheel all the time, you can actually get an attachment for this specific jack where you can get a foot plate on the bottom so it's just a little bit more stable, because not every time you're going to need wheels. Now, if you are curious to see what this is like to actually install, because it actually doesn't take too much time, just stay tuned. We'll walk you through the process. To start the installation, we're just going to block out a spot where we think this can sit at. So what I'm mainly looking for is to make sure nothing's going to get in its way. There's going to be two positions really to make sure it fits on just like this. And when you go to fold it up, nothing's going to get in its way. Now, we're looking pretty good here. I'm probably just going to move some of these chains and cables out of my way for now, so I just know for sure it will fit. Once that's done, I'm also going to make sure that we have this in the right orientation. I want to make sure that my tires are facing forward and the jack itself is facing behind. Once we've done that, we can start putting things together. Now, it is important that you do have your trailer jacked up. Right now, I just have ours connected to our vehicle, just to get enough height, if you don't have a jack handy with you. Now, you will have two brackets that will come with this kit, and you're going to have some bolts and some nuts come along with them so we can secure it on here. With our spot sorted out, we're just going to put our jack on, and you'll notice that's a lot of different holes we have. That's just going to depend on the thickness of the beam that you're installing it on. So with what we're using today, I'm probably going to just use these ones, the top corners. And we're going to grab one of these brackets to connect it to. Now when you're connecting these brackets, you'll notice you can put it on either side. You want to make sure that flat side is against the beam. We just push that through the center here. I'm just going to put it on this one for now. I might change it up later on. Make sure everything stays attached. And then I'm going to do that on the other side to make sure this stays in place. Afterwards, I can make some adjustments. So we actually had to move over to our passenger side because we were having some clearance issues. Now, you might run into some of that yourself. It's just going to depend on your trailer. So I took it off and put it on over here. The reason being is it's not so much as how it sits on the side, it's more so when it transitions. That's something I didn't take into account for, and really show you what I mean is when this goes to move over, our tire is almost making contact with the rest of our trailer. On the other side, it was making contact because we already have kind of kitted this out with other types of gear. So right now, you'll see this welded section we have for other types of jacks. That was actually getting in my way. And so that's part of the reason why we had to move over here. Now, a lot of people recommend keeping it on your driver's side just so you can have a better eyes on it and just as a little bit easier to access from your driver's side. But your passenger side will work too, even if you can't get to that driver's side. But with that aside, last thing I recommend is just to try it out to make sure this is going to work for you. And really by that, I mean just kind of lower it down, take it off from your jack or from your vehicle, and just try to move to see how it works. But that was just a look at the Ark Xtreme Off-Road Jack with wheels. I'm Matt. Thanks for watching.